Greetings everybody and welcome to Unit Spotlight number 1. If you know Rangru's Unit of the Week series, then you know what this is about. This is meant to be a spiritual successor to this, since Rangru stopped doing that with Wargame units, so I asked him whether he would be fine with me continuing it, and he said yes, so that's what I'm gonna do. If you're not familiar with it, this is basically taking a unit, or rarely sometimes maybe a unit line, out of Wargame, like a tank line or a plane or every kind of unit, telling a bit about the history, and then explaining you how it is in the game, what are its strengths, weaknesses, and so on. While I unfortunately do not have Rangru's charm or his sexy accent, at least I think I could bring a bit more gameplay experience and balance experience and knowledge to the table, so at least I guess there's that over his Unit of the Week series. And that's pretty much it. But before we get into it, big thanks to Noi. He helped me quite a bit with the historical part of the Unit Spotlight, and without him, wouldn't have been that accurate, would have made some mistakes, so now let's get into it. Episode number 1 is gonna be about the F-4E Phantom II used by ANZAC in game. Now, the McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom is a two-seated supersonic jet interceptor and fighter bomber in use since the 1960s by Western countries. It was one of the most popular fighters in the post-World War II era, flying for 12 countries since its introduction over 50 years ago, and still used today. By some countries, not all of course. Originally, it was designed by the US Navy as a fleet defense aircraft. The inherent advantages of the design, two powerful engines, decent maneuverability, two crew members and a powerful radar, allowed it to be adapted to a wide variety of roles, from air superiority to ground strike to seat. While originally designed without a cannon, as we can see when looking at the F-4s used by the US Navy, if you look at this weird bulge at the bottom, unfortunately Eugen didn't bother to make a special model for that for the US Navy F-4s in game. Some later models have the M61 Vulcan, or Laser Death Blaster, if you look at the game stats, included. During the Vietnam War, the US encountered problems with dogfighting with nimbler Soviet designs. While this was due to a wide variety of factors, including low reliability of early missiles and poor pilot training, the lack of a gun was seen to limit the versatility available to pilots. This led to the US Air Force to install the Vulcan under the nose of their F-4E. The F-4 used by ANZAC is the F-4E Phantom II, which was in Australian service during the early 70s. It was a stopgap aircraft while they awaited the delivery of the F-111C, which we also have in game, which would serve as a long-range strike aircraft for the Royal Australian Air Force. Development challenges meant that the aircraft would not enter into service as planned, so 24 F-4s were loaned from 1970 to 1973. Near the end of their short time in service, a serious offer was made by the US to retain them in the Royal Australian Air Force service, but it was turned down on financial considerations. In-game, the F-4E Phantom is a 19 points ASF with an early version of the M61 Vulcan as its gun, since depending on when the aircraft was introduced, the Vulcan has different stats like accuracy and range versus planes. It is further armed with the 4 AIM-9B short range and the 4 AIM-7F Sparrow medium range anti-air missiles, both being on the lower end of the spectrum. Compared to the AIM-9L, an often found missile on Bluefire planes, the AIM-9B loses 350 meter range versus planes and a whopping 20% accuracy. The AIM-7F Sparrow on the other hand loses 700 meter range and 10% accuracy when compared to the Skyflash, and even 20% plus another 700 meter range when compared to the higher tier semi-active missiles of Red 4. On top of that, it has a speed of 900 km per hour and a turn radius of 400, which it both shares with each F4 in game. It also has 10% ECM and a time over target of 180 seconds. You can get either 4 at Rookie or 3 at Hardened, ignoring the availability bonus of ANZAC. If you choose to play ANZAC, then you can get either 5 or 4 respectively. Taking it on Hardened boosts its AIM-9 and Vulcan accuracy to 37% and the Sparrow accuracy to 48%, making those at least a bit more reliable. Nonetheless, it is still one of the worst fighters you could take. Due to not being available at veteran or elite, the missiles and the gun, to some extent, still remain pretty inaccurate, especially when you have to deal with planes that actually have ECM. It gets outclassed too easily by planes in the 120 points price area, which usually come on elite, and with 30 or more % ECM, while only getting you one less plane per card. Yet, due to its price and availability, you can easily build up a fairly early ASF net, protecting you at the very least fairly well against bombers and ATGM planes, since those tend to not fire back as much. Generally, they act more like a support towards your AA, rarely killing planes on their own, but sometimes dealing the crucial 4 or 5 HE damage to finish them off. Alternatively, you can use them behind your bombers or ATGM planes, using those as bait for enemy ASFs, and finishing those off with your F4s. However, that can easily lead to you losing your bait, so you have to be aware of that and be careful when trying to use that strategy. But of course, in ANZAC you don't really have much better choices, the only other one being the Mirage, which is arguably even worse. Well, not arguably, it is probably much worse. However, in Commonwealth you have the Hornet, you have the Tornadoes, you have the Eurofighter, plenty of good options. So, unless you're, again, playing ANZAC, you shouldn't really be forced to use this plane, so generally don't bother with it. So, this was the first episode of Unit Spotlight. Let me know what you think, and I hopefully see you next time.